Hi class, whether you finished exam one or you're still needing to take it, here is the lesson for Module 5 on reading. So next we're going to go to a really good idea or the power process idea for Chapter 4. Remember, these are ideas you can apply right now. So first I want you to imagine that you're sitting in a room next to someone. What would you tell them distracts you? What keeps you from reading and concentrating on work that's challenging? Is it your past? Is it your family? Is it work? Is it house cleaning? Is it pets? Is it responsibilities? Financial woes? Health concerns? What pops into your mind as being the most distracting thing to you right now? I wanted you to have that in your mind's eye as we talked about the power process idea, which is about noticing your pictures and letting them go. So the whole idea is that pictures, mental pictures, they can be images, sensations, sounds, but they're things that we use to make predictions. They direct our thinking, our conversations, and our actions. In a sense, they're kind of imprints or records of ways that we've satisfied needs in the past. For example, if you grew up in a household where people yelled a lot, you might have adapted to that situation so that you could make sure you wouldn't get too much yelling, and you would be able to predict when one member of the family or another was going to go off. So notice that we're constantly relying on these previous experiences we've had to actually predict and adapt in new situations. Let me give you another example. So you could walk into a room and see people's faces, and you have a prediction about what kind of mood someone is in based on their facial expressions. And that, when you do that, whenever you go, oh, that person's mad, that person's angry, that person's sad, that person's happy, you're actually relying on a series of mental constructs or pictures in your mind that you've used in the past to predict what's really going on in a situation. The problem is sometimes those images that we have relied on to help us survive in different situations prevent us from seeing what's really there. Has that ever happened to you? Where you look at a friend down the hall and you go, oh, so-and-so's mad at me. And then you find out, oh no, they're not mad at me. They just had something happen to them. It has nothing to do with you. There's a problem with pictures, and they can set us up for expectations that can lead to disappointment and can really derail us in a way. So, for example, you could have images in your mind about how school is supposed to be. This should be easy. This shouldn't be so hard. This should be more X. This should be more Y. Those images that you have in your head actually can distract you from focusing. So what do? You notice the fact that you have a picture, and that is the key. It's kind of like the beginning idea in this book, that truth is the key to mastery. Once you can recognize that image, you can be aware of its influence, and you can let it go. You go, okay, maybe learning is challenging. Maybe that's okay. Maybe I can make friends with the discomfort of the challenges of learning. So the key idea here is first to recognize and be aware of something, and then again let go of the influence and replace it with a new image. Oh, maybe I should just remain neutral about this learning process instead of rushing to judgment. Just an idea. Maybe you're viewing this recording about reading before you take exam one, but I'm also assuming that some of you are watching it and you've already finished exam one. So what kind of mental images factored into your experience? What mental images or pictures factor into other exams and other classes that you have taken? How can you notice that you're giving yourself a picture and then let it go? That's the big idea here. First step is awareness. Once we become aware of something, we can let it go and change it. Sounds very simple, right? I hope you're smiling. Reading. That's the big idea for Chapter 4, ways that we can read better. What do you think? Want to try something new? So the big idea of Chapter 4 is really muscle reading, and it's a strategy for getting more out of your reading. And I know this is something that a lot of students struggle with. And frankly, even though personally I really like reading, I need help sometimes. I can't always focus or pay attention. So the 3 phases of muscle reading include before, during, and after reading. This might sound very basic to you, but notice this is maybe you don't actually do something before you read. It's kind of the idea that preparation is helpful. You have to get warmed up. So the preview, outline, and question are really the ways to kind of get you geared up to reading. Focus and flag answers is what you do while you're actually reading. So you kind of identify the key ideas. And then after you read, and this is key, and we've learned that through the problems of memory and all that we know from Chapter 3, that if we don't do this, if we don't recite, review, and review again, we tend to forget things very quickly. So, try out this process, right? If you don't try out the muscle reading, you won't know if it actually works for you. So we're going to unpack it a little bit more. So I really like the leaner approach to muscle reading that you can find on page 132. I know sometimes students read the whole process of muscle reading and they kind of go, oh, I'll never do this because it sounds too complicated. But I bet you could do the leaner approach, and we're going to practice that in a moment. So I want you to imagine adopting the technique of muscle reading and taking notes, literally writing things down while you're reading. The last question that I want you to consider, and this is a key idea here, is how does the muscle reading actually follow the information processing model? Remember the information processing model of memory that talks about taking information in into your senses, rehearsing it, right? Which could be a kind of preview phase, and then actually encoding information, which is a reading phase. It's what you do while you're reading, encoding. And then the retrieval process, retrieving and reviewing within 24 hours, is the last part of the process, or the last part of muscle reading. So notice that 3-part structure and how important that is to reinforcing memory. Okay, so I'm going to suggest that you try this out. You might need to pause the video and try this out, but I want you to choose an article from the textbook. So think of this as in practical terms. It's going to help you finish or complete some current or future homework assignment. So take a moment and just skim one article. And as you're skimming the article, write down questions. Like, why questions? What questions? How questions? Just write down some questions. And then put a little timer on and read the article and answer the questions that you wrote down. Now, we won't literally do this all together, but after you're done with the questions, go back and review them. You can do this at home. You can do it out loud. All right? So I've simulated here for you what you might do if you were reading the article on page 137, which is the article on reading fast. So here is my example of notes from a muscle reading session using, I would say, the leaner approach. So notice I just created some questions based on the headings and things that leapt out at me from the article. And then right below the questions, I wrote an answer. Now, if you have any textbook that has highlighted words, let's say you're in an anthropology class, you have terms that you're learning. What is this? And then write the answer below. This question and answer is an active engagement, really helps with your memory. So this is something to try out in any class. Now there's another reading method that is not listed in your textbook, so I have uploaded a PDF file or handout. So on the slide that you see before you is really just kind of an overview, brief overview of the article that I uploaded to the learning module here. So notice SQ3R stands for survey, survey the chapter or textbook, question while you are surveying. It's kind of like preview and writing down questions. And then it says when you begin to read, do something. And then recite after you've read a section and review. So that is what the S, the Q, and the 3 R's stand for. So you can see here, it's giving you some very specific ideas, like, as you're looking at a chapter, see if you can notice the titles, the headings, the subheadings, any captions under pictures, charts, graphs, etc. Then, in order to create questions, turn the title, heading, or subheadings into questions. What did my instructor say about this chapter when it was assigned? That's another thing you could ask yourself. Then as you're reading, does this not sound familiar to muscle reading? As you're reading, answer the questions. This is a very direct and guided approach to reading, which will help you. Then after you're done, orally ask yourself questions. And you'll notice there's lots of ideas for timing a review that extends over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days, a whole week. Try these ideas out. They might work for you. So you'll notice that one of the things I've asked you to do on the current homework assignment is to compare and contrast muscle reading and the SQ3R method. So I've given you this little outline here. It's sort of a Venn diagram where muscle reading is on one side and SQ3R is on the other. And then the arrow that I've pointed to in the middle is the section where they overlap. So this is just a reminder to you that when you write a compare contrast, you are making comments both on how the two reading methodologies are similar, the part in the middle, and also you're making a comment on how they're different. There is so much more to reading, and reading is essential, and oftentimes people need to strengthen reading first. Now, if we were all sitting in a room, we could brainstorm all the different issues that people have with reading. Tired, blah, 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 blah. We could go on and on. But I want to suggest to you that one thing that you could definitely do, and this helps everybody, is just to think about expanding your vocabulary. That is one way to strengthen your reading. Another idea that I'd like you to consider is the idea that sometimes it helps to read around other people, and sometimes it doesn't. So that's a very personal distinction there. Consider that one. I'd also like you to consider the difference between primary and secondary sources. So primary sources are like short stories, poems, essays. They are, if you're going to learn about Freud from a primary source, you're going to read Freud. If you're going to learn about Freud from a secondary source, you're going to read a textbook. So remember, every time you read a textbook, you're reading somebody else's interpretation of the primary source. And in order to really go further, you need to strengthen your reading. We'll talk more about information literacy.